Hello everyone, it's Merlin here. Upon request from our leader, Anime Green, otherwise known as the Green Flash, I have been told to talk about something. And, well, after sitting here thinking for a little bit, I decided to discuss a topic that often comes up in the anime community, which I've never really said my 2 cents to any great length or degree. And that would be the sub versus dub argument. Now, generally, I think everybody can agree that when it comes to the whole dub versus sub thing, like just about everything else, it comes down to personal preference. What voices you believe suit your characters the best, and usually it's greatly influenced by which version you saw first. Especially if there's nostalgia involved, you're going to be more attached to a particular dub, whether Japanese, English, or whatever. There are two particular sides to this argument. And like any sides to any argument, there are going to be extremes, which, well, to be honest, are often silly, but to a certain extent are reasonable depending on certain points. When it comes to the general argument against dubs, particularly American English dubs, for a long time it was basically believed, and it was very true for some time, that due to laziness and mistranslations and just marketing decisions, oftentimes the dialogue was changed greatly to often cheesy or silly lines or, well, even rather idiotic ones, and oftentimes it would sort of betray the aspect of the original character, making characters say things that they probably wouldn't normally say due to the original plot of the original series. This point leads sub-purists to basically going about saying that there's virtually no dub that they can watch, and that the original Japanese dub is ultimately better, because it's the most direct experience they can have due to the original ideas of the creators, and it feels more culturally sound, like it's less Americanized, which is an argument that I can respect. There's also another valid complaint that even I've noticed from time to time that is a bit annoying. As Funimation continues to monopolize on anime distribution and dubbing, there are really only a couple select casts of voice actors left in the US, and as you begin to watch many different series, no doubt you'll notice many voice actors taking many roles, and this might become distracting as you might associate one character with a certain voice. Now granted, some voice actors are more talented and they have a certain amount of range, and you can be satisfied with it. In general, most dubs have really improved over time. Originally, the argument about dubs betraying the aspects of the original creator's intent would have been more valid, especially when we're talking about early dubbing. Go back in time to the earliest influences of Japanese animation in the US. Anime has been with the United States for a long time, since the 1960s with Astro Boy, and later with series like Lupin the Third and Speed Racer, Gotcha Man, and various others, perhaps the best known as being Voltron in the 80s. The dubbing was honestly not as good. This was primarily due to the fact that since anime wasn't really seen as something worth capitalizing on back in the day, a lot of the voice actors were, quite frankly, amateur at best. And because these dubbing companies were starting out flimsily, due to error or honestly just bad judgment, the dialogue was often changed significantly and sometimes with horrible and even hilarious results. However, as I said, that has really improved over time, and generally most series now come out with at least decent dubs. Now granted, there have been a few series here and there that there are flubs, some voice acting choices are still bad, and there will always be high and low points to any series, whether you're talking about the dub or the sub. Now when it comes to the argument against subs, to be perfectly honest, once again it comes down to personal preference, especially if you're associated with one series' voices over another. At the end of the day, the primary argument against subs seems to generally spring from, well, two arguments. One of them, I think, is generally laziness. People don't like to read subtitles. Quite honest, I've heard this complaint a number of times. People just don't like to read subtitles while they're watching something. And this is an argument I can understand. I'll be honest, even though I love many sub series and I prefer certain subs over dubs, generally, even if the dub isn't necessarily that great, most of the time I'm probably going to want to watch the plot unfold as naturally as I can, and unfortunately, reading the subtitles can be a little distracting, especially if they're not timed together very well. Sometimes there's a lot of dialogue that has to come out depending on what series you're talking about. Granted, this isn't normally a problem, and ultimately it comes down to personal preference. The other argument I've heard is that, well, the other argument I've often heard for dubs is that no matter what, no matter how accurate Funimation, Viz, or Bandai, or anyone else ever tried to make the series as accurate and true to the source material as it could be, there's always going to be a difference, especially when it's being viewed by audiences from a different culture. They're going to bring a whole new perspective, and it's just going to be a different experience. Now, as long as the true nature and the basic aspect that made the series great is still there, then there's no real reason to complain. As long as they don't try to over-Americanize it like they often did in the 90s and early 2000s, when they tried to air many anime series on Saturday morning cartoon blocks, the results were somewhat mixed. As long as we can avoid that, we should generally be alright. All in all, once again, it does come down to personal preference, but I do believe that dubs certainly have their place, And on the whole, the quality of dubs have improved significantly over time, and for the most part, they're not bad. Though, of course, there are exceptions to every rule. When it comes to subs, though, I'm glad that they released both versions with their DVDs. And granted, as I said before, there are certain series that I prefer subbed over dubbed, and vice versa. And though I can honestly see why some people would complain about one or the other, I respect both opinions, I think both are necessary, and ultimately both ways of viewing are a great way to bring new perspectives onto a series that you might not have seen before and initiate a lot of good discussions. Well, that was essentially my piece on subs versus dubs. This has been Merlin here on Green Clan Studios, and I hope to see you guys next time. Merlin out.